feelings were discovered because you're everything to me. I'm in love. Curious, wide awake, but you're the only one in my dreams. I believe we were meant to be. You said that you'd eaten me. Turns out you're deceiving me. Practice what you preach is key. You did what you had to do. Possible reality seeping through. I'm just a millimeter from leaving you. It's so bad, but there's something about your love. 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 Curious, wide awake, but you're the only one in my dreams. I believe we were meant to be. You said that you needed me. Turns out you're deceiving me. Practice what you preach is key. Ooh. You did what you had to do. Possible reality seeping through. I'm just a millimeter from leaving your ass. It's so bad, but there's something about your love. 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 There's something about your love.
Thanks for checking out that footage of the new GoPro Hero 7 on my FPV plane. The new GoPro Hero 7, let's just go ahead and say it. It is, again, another game changer for everyone out there, no matter what you're shooting. If you're shooting mountain biking going down a hill, if you're shooting surfing, or you're shooting kiteboarding or skateboarding, anything that has a lot of vibration, where you need some kind of dampening for the camera and the speed that you're going, the rate of speed, you need to have a lot of cushion for that video not to look bouncy and edgy. So around 5 years ago was when I probably got my first GoPro, and this one is so much better than my last version of the GoPro, the Hero 6, with this new Hypervision or Hyperflow or whatever they want to call it on here. Has really changed the game for the RC hobby. If you're flying airplanes, you're going to put something on the front of an FPV plane. This is about $400 for the Hero Black. It does actually, at Best Buy has a pretty good deal on it right now, and Amazon as well. I'll try to put both those links down there below, but you can get like an extra SD card with this, and when I bought it, I was able to get an extra 64 gigabyte SD card, and I do believe it does stabilization on 2.7K at 60 frames per second. So that's kind of huge for people that are flying FPV planes and multi-rotors. If you're flying a race drone, for example, you're going to get spectacular footage. It's going to look like you have a gimbal on the front of your race quad. And some of us are practicing what we call the art of slow flow. And slow flow is slowing things down a little bit and flying more from a cinematic point of view. Still doing freestyle tricks, combining slow and fast footage for a more sort of cinematic, kind of epic, big world edit, and showing a lot of mountain ranges, using some medium to long range type of receivers. Something like this for those guys, the long range hooligans, this is where it's at. This is the money for 2018, the end of 2018. I wish this would have came out earlier in our season for 2018, because there's been a lot of really nice summer days that we missed out on not having this until the fall. And I didn't get my hands on one until this week. So my first test on it was on this FPV plane for you guys. And when I got home and looked at the footage, I was actually kind of astounded by how smooth it was. I sat down at my editing station like I always do and loaded up all my footage. And I opened up the file that came off this camera, and immediately, first thing I did was call my wife downstairs to check out the screen and show her this footage that this GoPro Hero 7 took. I was just blown away by it, and she's seen pretty much everything, my entire evolution of putting cameras on RC drones and planes. And one of her first comments about me putting a camera on a multi-rotor in the early days was that it looked like somebody was drunk driving. It was all over the place. It was before the brushless gimbals, where we had motorized gimbals. It was actually a two-axis servo gimbal. So yeah, they used to do servo gimbals before they did the brushless gimbals, before they incorporated motors. And when they added motors to gimbals, that just cleaned everything up. But now, here we are in late 2018, and we have something that does three-axis image stabilization at 2.7K, which is really, really amazing. So she noticed right away that the footage was way different, especially putting it on a plane was a good test for it, because planes aren't generally as smooth as our quadcopters are. The race drones and freestyle drones just eat through the air. They just burn through the air, and they don't care about the wind. It doesn't really affect the video too much, unless it's a really strong wind. Most of the time, if you have a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, nobody that flies race quads is really too concerned with that. Same thing with single rotor helis, the same thing. But on an airplane, when it's windy, like yesterday when I was flying this, it was around a 15 mile an hour wind, and this plane is not that heavy. I have a 3S 2200 in here, and I was getting around 13 minutes flight time on a 3S 2200. And there's actually more room in here. You could probably put something a little bigger in there. You might be able to even squeeze a 5,000 milliamp in there and get away with that. If you wanted to use something like a run cam little split mini setup in there, you can record your 1080p. That's the cheaper way to do it. The more expensive way to do it is going to be the GoPro Hero 7. Just mount it right on the front with a piece of Velcro, run a strap around it on the front. Be careful when you're landing. It's a little bit heavy in the front with this camera on there, but if you want to risk it, putting it up there, the reward is going to be amazing footage. But I'm going to show you how I have this plane set up. I'm going to tell you what the retail price on this one is, and we're going to talk about some recommended FPV gear, and we're going to talk about some of the specs on this plane, and we'll show you an awesome tail setup that it has too. You notice it has a camera right back here. I have a little zero flow camera right on the tail, and you could put a Mobius cam there, or you could put any kind of like little run cam too back here. The plane is powerful enough to carry 2 cameras at once. So if you wanted to even get a second little tiny Hawkeye Firefly cam, you could put one out on the wing right here, or you could put one underneath the wing. It's a really cool perspective when you add multiple cameras on these FPV planes. It's super cool, especially this one with the extended carbon fiber tail booms right here. You have all this space back here, and it looks really cool when you're shooting back this direction, or even if you wanted to flip the camera around and face it backwards, you could get some really cool trailing shots. So you could combine your edit with forward shot and a trailing shot. Some pretty cool stuff, and you can get pretty creative with it. But let's go ahead now. Let's break this one down on the bench, and I'll show you what this little affordable FPV plane is all about, and we'll talk about some recommended VTX for it, because I had a really good luck with this AKK VTX. I'm going to show you guys that, and it doesn't add a lot of weight to the aircraft. So here we go. Take a little closer look at this plane. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is prop selection. If you're just getting into airplanes, if this will say your first airplane that you want to FPV, I'm going to make some recommendations for you guys for prop setup. We'll talk about battery and the video setup next, but the plane is called the 079B. I'm not sure why they have it labeled that on the GearBest. That's probably some random stock number that this plane's called. They should probably call it by the plane's actual name, which is going to be the Skyhawk. If you look this up on YouTube, there's other people flying these already, and I've seen videos from about a year ago. I just recommended that they send me one of these because I thought it looked super cool and it looks different. Now, what I'm going to suggest for this plane is running a bi-blade prop. The 2-blade prop just makes way more sense. If you're flying a fixed wing aircraft, you're going to get a little bit better efficiency, and you're not going to overheat your ESC as easily as if you're using a tri-prop. Now, tri-props are probably fine on multi-rotors, and I have seen people running tri-props on FPV race wings, but then again, that's a race wing, and unless you want to go like really, really fast, you can push a lot of air with the tri-prop. But as far as battery life goes, when you're running a plane, a lot of times what you want out of a plane is something that's going to be a cruiser, like an FPV cruiser. So you can just get up there, and you want to do some distance flying if you want to add a crossfire on there, or the R9M module on your Taranis radio. Either one of those modules, you can get way out there with this plane. You can set your antenna way up off the top or off the bottom, whichever way you'd like. You could even run your antenna off the bottom as well. So the higher you go, you're still going to get signal. Now, this antenna setup right here worked perfectly with the AKK, and I have that 20x20 stack here. You're going to take a look at some of the specs on that. But I was also running 600 milliwatt with like no breakup in the transmission. It was kind of amazing. And I also used a short range receiver, which was one of my Spectrum Park Flyer receivers. And I generally run those for just a quick flight test for you guys in sort of a proximity environment. And I didn't want to go too far with the plane. Especially because I was running my GoPro Hero 7. And what you guys saw was actually the maiden flight of this plane. It was the first time I'd flown it, tossed it, and a friend of mine that was there that day made a comment that the plane, when I first threw it, he thought that there was a flight stabilizer on there. He actually thought I had a flight controller in it. And he was like, wow, what flight controller are you using? And I said, I'm not using any flight controller. It's just the way I have it trimmed out. And the travel limit that I have set up on the servos here. I had it limited to about 70 to 60% travel instead of going full 100. And if you only have like 5 millimeters up and down, you don't want to put too much on it. But if you have about 5 millimeters up this direction at full stick and then down that direction at full stick, same thing with the elevator. You don't want it to be 100% servo throw because if you do that on your maiden flight, one little tiny stick movement might make the plane jaunt into the ground or go up or down really fast. So I've seen people do maidens where their plane is just doing this, and you can tell, you know, as an experienced pilot, you can tell that people have just no expo or no travel limit on their flight surfaces. So very important to put some expo in it. For my Spectrum radio, I actually put about 25% expo in this plane. So you're looking at the prop setup back there with the motor, and they did include a bullet nut that goes right on the end of this right here, and I would highly not recommend using the bullet nut that came along with this plane. If you have another nut laying around that you can use, it's going to be a self-locking nut like this one. That is not going to fly off the back of the plane. If you're using one of those bullet nut connectors like comes with this little guy, it's quite possible that it could come off the plane mid-flight and you're going to throw a prop. So all of my wings, they all have the lock nuts on the back of them. Or if I'm running a prop in the front on an airplane, I'm always using some type of lock nut. The bullet nuts are very, very likely to fail on you. So get away from those. Don't use those, and stick with the lock nuts and you'll be good. You won't throw a prop on your plane. But this motor on here is a 2205, so it's very similar to what a lot of race quads are running, and it's also 2300 kV, so it's a little bit mid-range kV. It's not super low kV, but it's not super high either. So what that gives us on an FPV plane is a little bit longer flight time. It's a little more efficient. It's not turning as many revolutions per kilovolt. So that's going to be a big advantage for you when you're flying a fixed wing aircraft. And there's a lot of variables here that are going to either suck up your battery or you're going to get a long flight time. And a lot of it has to do with the weight that the plane's carrying, the load that it has to push, and the power system, the efficiency in the power system. And choosing the right prop is everything on the airplane. In a way, if you underprop it, you might be you might have to have a higher throttle and you'll end up eating more battery anyway. If you overprop it, you're going to be heating up your ESC the same way. So it's pretty important that you choose the right prop. And this happens to be a 5-inch bi-blade prop, and that's absolutely perfect for this particular weight setup and the way I have the weight distributed on the plane and where the CG is at. So this is actually working out quite well, and I was surprised at how well it flew on takeoff, and being able to get around 13 minutes flight time on a 3S 2200. I think I might be able to get longer than that if I hadn't used my old batteries. I have some old E-flite batteries that are probably 5 years old. So if you use a brand new graphene or something like that, you might be pushing into the 15-minute range. Now, you guys might have noticed right away that this plane looks different than a lot of other planes out there. There's no horizontal axis back there, and there's no tail boom out the back. The motor's in the middle right here, and they have these carbon fiber tail booms out to this sort of vertical V-tail. This is opposite fashion. Normally, a lot of times you have V-tail sticking up from a center tail boom and coming up like this, but this one is in reverse order, and it's kind of cool because you get a pretty decent airflow with a pusher setup like this on the plane. It makes the plane look a little bit odder. But the cool thing about this is, realistically, you're only setting up like 3 different channels on your radio. So if you're brand new to airplanes or fixed wing, this is actually really easy to set up on your radio. It kind of looks intimidating the way it sits, mainly because you have this strange stuff going on in the back here. That elevator setup back there is kind of intimidating to somebody new. All of these surfaces look a little bit strange to set up, but honestly, this is the way it goes down, and it's really easy. The first thing you're going to set up is going to be your ailerons, and once you have your servo lead plugged into your receiver, it's only one wire. There is a Y harness inside that both of these servos on the outside of the wing plug into. Then you have a single wire lead that's going to plug into your aileron section on your receiver. Now, if you're running FR Sky, you might need some kind of larger pin configuration on there to get all of your servo leads to plug in. Not going to be able to use something like an XM Plus receiver unless you have some type of converter. I've never even seen that on XM Plus, so you'll need a bigger FR Sky receiver that allows for fixed wing. So when you're setting this up, you're going to stand behind the aircraft, and let's just go ahead and spin it around like we're going to set it up at the field. And you need to make sure that all your surfaces are correct. So we're going to use the right stick here, and if I push to the left, I should see that left side go up. So there we have it going up. It sounds like it's binding just a little bit. If it's binding, you can always mechanically adjust it or put a little bit of trim into it. So mechanically adjust your servos. You want your surfaces to be completely flush with the wing at mid stick. So where I'm at mid stick right now, it's not 100% perfect. You can see this side is off a little bit, but I can correct that with just a tiny bit of trim. When you first get an airplane, a fixed wing, it's going to probably have the trims way off according to your radio. Once you get it powered up, you're going to even see sometimes an aileron will come way up at mid stick once you turn everything on, and that means that you need to do a mechanical adjustment on the servo. That just means you need to take a screwdriver, undo the little screw that's on the servo, and move the servo arm itself. Pop it off and move it just a little bit until it's nice and flat like that, and it should be flat all the way across at mid stick. That way when you do your maiden launch, you're not doing a lot of trimming on that aileron axis with your digital trim button. So that's going to be really important for your maiden, to do less trimming in the air and have a more predictable aircraft on the first launch. That's going to be super important. Also, putting in that expo of around 25% is really going to soften the controls. When I first started flying airplanes, I almost crashed my nitro airplane. It was one of my first 3D planes, and the reason was because they had huge surfaces and I had 100% throw, so my ailerons were doing this really crazy. And I took it back to the hobby shop, and the old guy there helped me set up a little bit of expo in my Spectrum radio, and that changed the game. It made the airplane fly straight and smooth. Also limiting the servo travel. You'll see at full stick on the right there, it only comes up a little tiny bit, maybe about 5 millimeters. Same thing on that side, and the same thing on the tail. See how little bit of travel? Now these servos will bring it way up. If you want this to be more responsive, you can leave them at 100% travel. But if you're flying sort of long range, smooth flying FPV, a lot of times you want a nice smooth flying airplane. You don't want kind of an aerobatic style plane. This is not really meant for aerobatic style flying. So you want this one to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to push left here. That goes up. I'm good there. And the right stick should also bring it up on the right side. So left, pushing left brings it up. Pushing right brings it up. So that is a correct aileron setup. Just like that. Now in the back of the aircraft, that is the third channel that you're going to set up. Once you have your motor direction right and it's pushing air back this direction, after you set up your ailerons, you're going to set up your elevator back here. And there is no rudder, so you're just going to plug these wires that are on the tail. They go through these carbon fiber tail booms, and they come to a Y harness up here in the fuselage and plug into your elevator channel. So if I push down right here like this on my Spectrum transmitter, it should come up. Both of those should immediately come up because they're working together. If we push forward on the stick, that's going to bring the nose of the airplane down, and the surfaces are going to go down as well. So up, down, and that one's pretty much ready to fly. And you can also, another tip, you can put a throttle cut on your transmitter. Same thing for Taranis radios. You can put a throttle cut on a switch. That way, if I hit the throttle on accident, nothing happens and it doesn't fly off the bench or cut my fingers. So if you want to arm the plane, flip that switch, and now the prop is turning. And I'll just zoom in here a little bit so you guys can see the prop direction. Your prop should have the leading edge facing to the right side of the plane, and when I throttle up just like that, it should turn to the right, and that's going to be the right direction. If you're standing in front of the plane, it's going to turn to, if you're standing to the rear of the plane, it's going to be turning left. To the front of the plane, it's going to be turning right. But most importantly, you want to feel air coming out the back, and the prop should be pushing air this direction and pushing the plane forward. So now that you guys kind of understand how the surfaces work on this plane, it is really simple. It's just 3 channels. Not a hard plane to set up at all. Just make sure, like I said, I keep repeating this, make sure you limit your surface travel on your servos, and put a little bit of expo in there. It's just going to make this flying experience a lot better. Now this plane, personally, I think it was way easier to set up since it did have just those 3 axes to set up. It's going to be way easier for a beginner fixed wing flyer than trying to fly something like the Zod Orbit. The Zod Orbit is definitely one of my favorite wings, but setting up the surfaces on a wing, you might actually need a little bit of help or find some kind of online documentation to set up your travel surfaces correctly on a wing, because you're going to have to do some mixing in your radio. And if you're not too familiar with mixing, you can get a lot of things wrong really quickly, because this is going to be a little harder for a new person to set up. If you've already flown wings, then that's not a big deal. But if you're looking for your first fixed wing aircraft, something like this would be way easier than trying to do a wing the first run out for your first fixed wing experience. And the characteristic of this is very predictable. You don't have a lot of stall speed with this. I was able to cut back to the 0 throttle, and the way this airplane wing, the profile of this is, it's really flat. It does have a little minimal dehedral on the outside tip out here. That just means a little bit of a flipped up tip, not a real aggressive flipped up tip. If they did a little more dehedral, it would probably fly a little bit slower and be a little bit more stable at the low speeds of the throttle, but you're going to get a much straighter track with this flat wing, and it's going to go a lot faster. So it did cut through the air, and it didn't quite have as much bounce. And that's what we're looking for when we're doing FPV, especially in the windier situations. It does track through the wind quite well. Now, the next recommendation I'm going to give you guys is for your CG setup. If you're going to run the Hero 7 on this particular plane, this is about where I have it on the aircraft, and I did put it a little bit back from the nose, maybe about say an inch from the very front of this piece where this comes off the plane. So you can measure back about an inch there. I do have a little more Velcro further back in case I was using maybe a little bit heavier battery. I'm going to adjust the battery situation inside the canopy so that the heavier battery would actually be sitting a little further back toward further toward the back of the aircraft to balance out the weight. If you're running a 3S2200, I'm going to show you where that should be on here, and that's going to be pretty much in a standard spot inside the aircraft. So we're going to have it about an inch back from where my split is, if you can see that type of setup right there. So it is about 3 inches from the nose. So normally if I'm running this without the GoPro on the front, I'm going to run this 3S2200 all the way to as far forward as I can get it without running into that run cam split right there. So it's going to be about there if you're not running the GoPro. Now, if you decide to try to run something a little larger like this 3S 4000 milliamp pack, what you're going to do here is you're going to actually run this battery right about here. So you can see how far that is backwards. And you're going to use your fingers to balance out the CG once you get this inside the aircraft and turned on here. We'll just go ahead and put the top on. And the CG points are right about here on the bottom of the wing. Look on the very bottom of the wing. You can see these 2 little slots right here. If you put your fingers right about there, you have a pretty good balanced wing right there. It might be a little bit nose heavy. It's leaning forward just a little bit, but it does feel pretty balanced out. Even with that 3S 4000 milliamp in there, I get a nice balance. And you could run the GoPro just a little further forward if you feel that it's tail heavy. If you feel that it's nose heavy, you could actually run this larger battery maybe a few millimeters back. Just a few millimeters makes a big difference when you're trying to get your CG right on a plane, but it should actually balance out nice and even. The worst thing in the world is a tail heavy plane. If you're flying around like this, it's going to be a big problem because it's going to cause the plane to stall out a lot, and you're going to have a real problem with it plane trying to climb too much. But the 3S2200, this is a good choice because these batteries are actually really cheap. I think they're even around $10. If you wanted to grab 4 or 5 of these, that would be a lot cheaper than running something larger on there. The 3S4000 packs are more expensive. This Nanotech one, I can't remember the price on this Nanotech one, but I believe it was around maybe $30 for one of these, so maybe $25. So that's a lot more expensive pack to run, but you might even get 15 to 20 minutes out of something like this. But it's going to fly a lot heavier. It's going to feel like you're flying a bus. So keep that in mind. The 3S2200 is going to be a better weight balance for running a GoPro and having any type of extra hardware on this that you're carrying. So that's going to balance it out quite nice. And if you're deciding to run a Hero 7 on here or any type of action cam that's sort of this format, you can run a strap around it just like this. I cut 2 little notches on each side right here, so I'm using a little bit longer strap. You're not going to be able to use your typical race quad battery strap. It's just not going to be long enough. You can combine straps and use like 2 straps to get all the way around your GoPro if you're using this one. If you're using a GoPro Hero Session or the Runcam 3S, you can probably fit that up here with a regular strap. And this is a nice Diatone strap. This is the longest strap that Diatone makes. So if you're looking for that, you can check out Diatone's website. But I have it just underneath there. Took a razor blade and cut it out. Piece of Velcro there. And that's about the perfect setup for my Hero 7. Now let's go ahead and talk about an FPV type of setup. I do have the Lumineer AX2 5.8 right-hand circular polarized antenna right there, and it's just coming. My MMCX connector comes around here, and I bored a hole right straight through the canopy right here and put 2 little dabs of hot glue and just screwed this down. Very simple setup, and I get the perfect signal with this type of setup. Now, what's so cool about this AKK transmitter, I showed this to you guys a few days ago on the FPV News video. If you want to see sort of a full overview of that, you can go back and check that one out. I did go into this in quite a bit of detail. It does have smart audio on here. It also has 2 connection points for your antenna. It has an MMCX and that UFL connector you can see right here. That's kind of cool that they did include both styles on there. If you want to run this on a brushless, sort of a brushless micro quad, you can do that UFL connector. If you want something a little more solid, I would go with this MMCX connector. These usually don't pop off. They do say it has about a 2 kilometer range with omnidirectional right-hand circular polarized antennas. I think on 600 milliwatt, you can get out there every bit of 2 kilometers. Very easy to do that. Now, what's also cool about this one is the fact that it does have all these wires already soldered up to it, which is nice because other manufacturers don't do that. And they also have a mic on here. So if you want to record your mic noise through your goggles, you can do that as well. So it should pick up your motor noise and all the air traveling over top of this VTX. And this VTX only weighs about 5.5 grams for the addition of this airplane. It really is nothing. But since I'm running at 600 milliwatt, it is changeable. It's switchable from 25, 100, 200, 400, 250, and I believe 600 milliwatt. Now, I have it on the outside, and it really isn't pretty the way I have it mounted. I just slapped it on there with a little bit of VHB underneath it. That's 3M VHB, and you want the maximum amount of airflow when you're running something super hot like 600 milliwatt. You'll feel it actually the chips will almost burn you. If you have it sitting on the bench running 600 milliwatt, be very careful because you do not want to burn this out. If you see where it starts to smell like burnt toast and your video goes black, it's likely that you burned this up. So a lot of times, especially during the hotter days, I will plug everything in really quickly and get it in the air as quick as I can. Don't leave it sitting around for 10 minutes. During the winter, you can leave it sitting around for a little bit longer, but once you have your video system plugged in, I usually try to take off as quickly as possible. Now, I do have this set up to be an external power outside the plane power, and mainly because I didn't want any additional noise coming from the ESC and motor system. I didn't use an LC filter in this equation, and you can power this one through the, probably just splice it in right here through the ESC. It is running a 20 amp ESC inside here. It's from Hobbywing. They do recommend that you only run this plane from 2 to 3S. Don't try to run this plane on 4S. You're going to fry that ESC. You'll need to upgrade the ESC before you do that. But since I do have it wired up for my external power only right here, and I have a couple extra wires here if I want to power something else, but I have a little XT30 right there. I'm getting the best signal and clarity out of that because I don't have any extra noise. And the coolest thing about this type of setup is the fact that the video system itself is really far away from the motor on this aircraft. So motor and ESC noise RF, the closer it is to your video system. A lot of times you want to mount these systems way out on the wing, away from, or run your antenna wire way out on the wing. That's what a lot of wing guys do. That way you get less noise coming back from the power system into your video feed. And if you guys want to check out AKK's website, it's akktek.com. So getting back to the plane, if you look on GearBest's website, they actually say it's a 12 amp ESC with 1806 2400 kV motor. That's not what I got. I got a 20 amp Hobbymate ESC on here. So it's a lot bigger and different than 12 amp. A 12 amp ESC is probably not going to be something that you see on this size of aircraft. That spec is wrong. Someone put the wrong information in there. And they really do need to work on their descriptions a little bit to make sure that people know what they're getting, because up at the very top of the page, it does say brushless 12 amp ESC, 1806 2400 kV motor. That's completely false. If you look a little bit further down, they still say it's 12 amp in the technical parameters on the page. Very, very strange. Now, I did measure out the wing for you guys, and it is 37 inches from this tip to this tip and around 30 inches in total length. So it's kind of a mid-sized plane, but overall a really cool aircraft, and I think it needs a little more love than what they're showing it on their web page. There's not a lot of information on it, and it really does need a good review like this one so that you can see all the different options that it does have to offer, because there's a lot of cool options that this plane has. As far as payload, you're probably definitely going to have no problem running a GoPro on here. If you want to add a flight controller, there's plenty of room inside. And underneath this wing right here, there's actually a tray where my VTX or my receiver is sitting. So you could also mount a VTX on the inside of the wing if you want. The coolest thing is that tray is actually on a track. So if you wanted to put a flight controller in there and get it dead spot on in the middle, it slides back and forth right here. So wherever you want to just position that little plate, you can sort of glue it in wherever you decide you want it, or maybe just put a couple dabs of hot glue so it's temporary. But there's a ton of options and a lot of room inside here to add as big a battery as you want. Big a battery as you can get away with. So yeah, you have tons of options, and a camera mounted tail spot, which is also really cool. And last but not least on this plane, in the very front of the plane, you can see the FPV camera way up front here. I did trim it back a little bit, and I was able to get my RunCam Split version 1 in here. If you leave this front part on, you can't really push it through as far as you need to get it without seeing a little bit of black around the frame. So if you're recording your 1080p video right here, you definitely want to just take a razor blade, trim that back a little bit. If you're trying to get a much larger aircraft camera in here, if you're using something like the Foxeer Falcor, you're going to need to really bore this out a little bit more, but you can do that. There is quite a bit of foam inside the nose right here. You could, if you really wanted to, you could move it up here to avoid some of those landings. This is a little bit low right here, but it does have this little fin underneath here. Not much to protect it, honestly. So I would definitely recommend landing this in grass. But let's go ahead and talk about a star rating for this one. I'm going to give this one 4.5 because of all the options that it has, and the huge canopy and the bay inside here can accommodate a really large battery. A couple points off, or maybe I would like to see like a 30 amp ESC on this. I think a 30 amp ESC would put me up in the 4S range and let me run a 4S, maybe 2650 would be a really good size battery for this plane. So if you get this one, you want to upgrade it. The 2205 motor can handle 4S battery, so no problems there. And you can get even a much longer flight time because you're going to be able to have a little bit more power as well and get a longer flight time. So more than 15 minutes flight time on this for around $100 is just an awesome plane. So I appreciate you guys watching this review. Be sure to comment down below because we're giving away that Baby Hawk R Pro this month and that IH3 sub 250 gram little long range drone with a run cam split mini on there. So super sick giveaways coming up on November 2nd. So we're right around the corner to giving those away to you guys. So make their comments down there. All of these videos are going to be compiled on November 2nd. We're going to do the random name picker, and I'm going to send those to your front door. So free of charge, but the winner pays the shipping, of course. And also, guys, we're doing live streams now. If you like the live streams, those are going to go to members only soon on the channel. So we're going to do some kind of up close and personal live streams, hanging out, FPV trips, camping trips. We're going to do some flying episodes as well. And those will be for our members only. It's like $4.99 a month, but I know it sounds like a lot, but you can only get that if you have 100,000 subscribers or more on the channel. So you have to put quite a bit of work into your channel before you can get to that level, which is super cool that we got approved for that. So you can check that out down below if you click the join button right there. We've got some people signing up for that. So we did our first live stream yesterday, and that was pretty cool. You can go back and check that out. And the other option to interact with Drone Camps is to sign up on our Patreon. We do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We have a little community building, and we're getting close to around 150 supporters now. I'd like to get that number up to around the 200 level. I'm setting goals for that, and I want to get the Patreon support up to around $1,000 a month. That would be super epic and really start to give me a lot more freedom on the channel. And that's what this is all about. More freedom for me means more freedom for you guys, and a lot more awesome videos to come. But I really appreciate any type of support, even if it's just clicking the subscribe button. That's also really awesome. So I want to say thanks to all my subscribers first and foremost, Patreon guys, and the new channel memberships available. But thanks again for watching, hanging out, and flying. And as always, guys, I'm Justin Davis. Please take care, and hopefully you're flying today. Happy FPV, guys. I'll see you on the next one.
Something about your love that I shouldn't publicly speak of. New feelings were discovered because you're everything to me. I'm in love. Curious, wide awake, but you're the only one in my dreams. I believe we were meant to be. You said that you'd eaten me. Turns out you're deceiving me. Practice what you preach is key. You did what you had to do. Possible reality seeping through. I'm just a millimeter from leaving you. It's so bad, but there's something about your love. 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 Curious, wide awake. you're the only one in my dreams. I believe we were meant to be. You said that you needed me. Turns out you're deceiving me. Practice what you preach is key. Ooh. You did what you had to do. Possible realities seeping through. I'm just a millimeter from leaving your ass. It's so bad, but there's something about